I never imagined my life would spiral this way. If you'd asked me a year ago about where I saw myself, I would have painted a pretty clear picture: stable job, a woman I loved, a home that was ours, maybe a dog roaming around, a couple of kids running through the room someday. That future was so tangible, so close I could almost touch it. And yet here I am, staring down the darkest kind of loss, trying to hold myself together in a world that suddenly feels hollow and broken. My name's not important. You won't ever know me beyond this story. And that's fine. I've always been a private person. Kept my cards close to my chest. Maybe it's a habit I developed from years of training in martial arts and fighting disciplines. Or maybe it's just who I am by nature. I like control of my body, my environment, my emotions. But that slipped right through every crack, like a tidal wave that hit without warning. Her name was Emma. She was 28, a year older than me, vibrant and full of light. We met in college, of all places. One of those accidental meetings during a campus event, where I was wrestling and she was volunteering for a charity drive. I remember thinking then that she was different. There was a warmth in her smile and a quiet strength behind her eyes that made you want to lean in to listen closer. We started talking after that day, and soon what was a casual friendship turned into something deeper. 2 years together, living in a modest apartment in the city, sharing our lives in ways only two people who truly care can. She was more than my girlfriend. She was my partner, my confidant, my future. We'd talk endlessly about the life we wanted to build, the trips we'd take, the house we'd buy one day, and yes, the wedding we were planning. I can still remember the night we sat on our tiny balcony, looking out at the city lights, and she traced patterns on my arm, telling me how much she loved the idea of us growing old together. I told her the same, and we dreamed aloud, not knowing how fragile dreams could be. Work took me out of state sometimes, long hours that drained me, but paid the bills. She understood. We made it work. I never once imagined that a job would be the reason I wasn't there to protect her, but I was. And that's the hardest part to swallow. It wasn't just a death, it was murder, brutal, calculated, a shattering act that ripped her from this world and left me drowning in a nightmare that felt unreal. I still replay the call I got that day, the voice on the other end barely holding it together, telling me she was gone. It felt like the air left my lungs all at once. I wanted to scream, to run, to find her and make it right, but she was already gone. Police came, asked questions I couldn't answer, took statements from her friends and family, but the truth is, I don't believe they'll catch whoever did this. Not in a city where crime is an everyday headline, where murders are just statistics and justice is often a distant, fading hope. I've seen it before. I've watched cases go cold, seen killers walk free because the system failed. So if the law won't bring justice, then who will? That's the question that's haunted me every second since. I'm not someone you want to cross. I started training in martial arts when I was 4 years old. It was a way to channel my energy, to build discipline. But it became something much more over time, a part of who I am. For 20 years I've trained relentlessly. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, wrestling, Muay Thai, boxing, karate, Sambo, and so many more disciplines you wouldn't even believe. I wrestled Division 1 in college, not to brag but to show you I'm not some ordinary guy. I'm strong, fast, lethal. I'm not just muscle and technique either. I've studied weapons, firearms, knives, swords, you name it. My hands are trained to move with precision and purpose. I'm built for combat, but none of that mattered on the day she was taken from me. None of that could stop what happened while I was away. And so I'm left here, consumed by grief and rage. The kind of rage that twists your insides and makes you want to tear the world apart. I don't want sympathy or pity. I don't want to hear platitudes about healing or moving on. What I want is justice. My kind of justice. And I will have it, no matter what it costs me. Looking back now, there were signs, small ones that I ignored or rationalized away. The way Emma seemed tired more often, how she stopped sharing details about her days, how she looked over her shoulder sometimes when she was out with friends. I thought it was stress from work or maybe just normal life pressures. I was wrong. There was something darker lurking beneath the surface, something I didn't see until it was too late. Our apartment was filled with memories, photos of trips we'd taken, gifts we'd exchanged, little notes left on the fridge. Every corner held a fragment of our life together. Walking through those rooms now feels like stepping into a ghost town. She's gone, but her absence echoes louder than any presence ever could. Her family has been devastated. I see it in their eyes when we talk on the phone, broken, lost, searching for answers that don't come. Her friends are shattered too. posting memories online, sharing stories of her kindness and laughter. It's all painfully beautiful and horribly cruel. And me, I'm barely holding on. Nights are the worst, when everything goes quiet, and the weight of what happened presses down like a stone. I try to sleep, but my mind races with thoughts. What if I'd been there? What if I'd done something differently? What if I could turn back time? I'm angry at the criminals who did this, at a world that allows such violence, at myself for not being there. But mostly I'm angry, because I know the truth. If I don't act, no one else will. These monsters will keep hurting people like Emma. They'll think they're untouchable. That's why I'm writing this now, even if you never know my name or face. This isn't a plea for help, it's a warning. I will find whoever is responsible. I will bring them down, not with the law, but with my own brand of justice. And I won't stop until the scales are balanced. You might wonder what kind of person I am. Maybe a vigilante, maybe something dark. I can't say more, but believe me when I say these criminals made a terrible mistake. They picked the wrong guy to mess with. I'm ready. I've been ready my whole life, even if I didn't know it. For now, all I have is the memory of Emma. Her smile, her laugh, the way she held my hand when I was scared. Those moments will carry me through the storm ahead. And so begins my story. A story of love lost, of pain endured, and of a promise made in blood and fire. A promise that I will have my vengeance. It was a Thursday morning when everything changed. I was halfway through a 2-week project out of state. A job that paid well but kept me away from Emma, and home longer than I wanted. I'd been counting down the days, texting her every night, sharing little details to keep us close. She sounded tired sometimes but happy. She always sounded happy when we talked. That morning, I woke early, jet lag still messing with my sleep. I remember staring at the ceiling, thinking about the dinner we planned for that weekend, the little celebration we'd promised ourselves after all the stress. It felt like the kind of normal everyday thing couples do. Simple, comforting, a small light in a hectic world. Then my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. The voice on the other end was shaky, almost breaking. It's Emma. She's been hurt. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart slammed against my ribs. I begged them to explain, but all I could hear was the crackle of panic. Then came the words I never wanted to hear. She didn't make it. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. I dropped the phone, sat on the edge of the bed, feeling like the floor was collapsing beneath me. The world tilted sideways. I was thousands of miles away, and my girlfriend, my future, was gone. I kept asking why, how, who, but there were no answers, just silence, broken only by the hollow sound of my own ragged breathing. I felt frozen, trapped in a nightmare, where the sun had gone down. The next few hours were a blur of calls, flights, police reports and stares from strangers who didn't know what to say. I remember standing in the airport clutching my phone, scrolling through her last messages, texts, filled with love and laughter, and wondering if I'd missed something, a warning, a sign. When I finally got home, the apartment felt empty, colder than I remembered. Her scent lingered faintly in the air, something floral, her favorite candle burning low. I sank to the couch, tears spilling over like a dam breaking inside me. I kept reaching for my phone, as if I could call her, hear her voice again, but all I heard was silence. The police told me it was a robbery gone wrong, some random act of violence. But I knew better. Emma was cautious. She didn't live a risky life. The brutality of the crime told a different story, one of cruelty, of intention. She was a victim of something far worse than a chance encounter. Her friends gathered, their faces etched with shock and grief. They told me about the last night, how she was walking home after a late dinner with them when she was followed, how she tried to fight back, how they found her the next morning. The details were gruesome, impossible to forget. I kept replaying it in my head. Her fear, her fight, the sound of footsteps behind her. I wasn't there. I should have been there. In the days that followed, the world around me began to crumble. Workmates offered condolences but drifted away, not knowing what to say. Family members called, some with awkward silence, others with tears. Emma's family was shattered. I wasn't sure how to hold them, or even myself. I tried to sleep, but nightmares replaced rest. I dreamt of chasing shadows, of hands grabbing at me, of screams muffled in darkness. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the taste of fear sharp in my mouth. My thoughts became a chaotic storm, rage, guilt, sorrow, all battling inside me. I wanted answers, but there were none. I wanted justice, but the system seemed indifferent. The police investigations stalled. No new leads, no suspects. The media covered the story briefly before moving on to the next headline. Emma's name faded from the news but not from my mind. I realized then that if I didn't act, if I waited for the law to do its job, those criminals would walk free. They would disappear into the shadows and maybe hurt someone else. That thought was unbearable. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. And I knew something else. I was the only one who could do anything about it. I started planning, quietly, methodically. I pulled out every skill I had learned over the years, everything my martial arts and training had taught me. This wasn't about showing off, or fighting for sport anymore. This was personal, this was survival. I studied the crime scene reports, news articles, even neighborhood gossip. I listened to police scanners, watched for patterns. Every detail mattered, every scrap of information was a piece of the puzzle. There were nights I sat alone, staring at pictures of Emma, remembering her laugh, the way she'd wrinkle her nose when she was amused. I whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep to find the people who did this, to make them pay, to stop the pain from spreading to others. But even as I hardened myself for what was ahead, part of me still wished it could all be a nightmare, that I could wake up and find her beside me, safe and alive. That moment never came. When the initial shock finally started to fade, it was replaced by a deeper kind of pain, the kind that doesn't scream but seeps into every corner of your life. Losing Emma wasn't just losing someone I loved, it was losing a part of myself. The future we dreamed of vanished, and in its place was a void that no amount of time or distraction could fill. I went back to work a few days later, mostly because I had to. Bills don't stop, and life keeps moving whether you want it to or not. But every step felt heavy, like walking through quicksand. The office was a place of awkward silences and forced condolences that didn't reach the bottom of the wound. My coworkers didn't know how to handle my grief, and honestly I wasn't sure how to either. I avoided calls from friends. I didn't want to explain what happened over and over. The sympathy felt like a spotlight on my brokenness, and I hated being seen like that. I told myself I had to be strong, for Emma's family, for her friends, for the memories we shared. But the truth was, I was barely holding on. Her family was crushed, and the distance between us felt like a chasm. They wanted answers I couldn't give. They wanted closure that wouldn't come. I remember talking to her mother once, her voice trembling, as she asked me if I believed the killers would be found. I wanted to comfort her, to promise justice, but I felt like a fraud. The police weren't moving fast enough, and I feared the case would grow cold. At night, the loneliness was suffocating. I kept replaying the last time I saw Emma, the way she smiled when I left for work, the way she kissed me goodbye. I could almost hear her voice, soft and reassuring, telling me everything would be okay. But it wasn't. I started isolating myself. Friends stopped calling. Invitations to hang out were declined without explanation. I couldn't bring myself to be around people who didn't understand the depth of the wound. Even my own reflection looked foreign, eyes hollow, face tight with pain. The anger simmered beneath the surface, sometimes exploding in small bursts. I found myself slamming doors, punching walls, throwing things. But the rage never felt enough. It was a flicker, a desperate spark in the dark. I reached out to a counselor once. I thought maybe talking would help, but sitting in that sterile office, recounting my pain to a stranger, felt hollow. They offered platitudes and coping strategies that didn't touch the rawness inside. I left feeling emptier than before. Sleep became a strange. The nights stretched endlessly, filled with nightmares that twisted reality into something even worse. I would wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, gasping for breath. The exhaustion made the days harder, but I couldn't escape the torment. At some point the thought of revenge began to take root, not the childish kind, but a cold, calculated determination. If the law wouldn't bring justice, then I had to. I had the skills, the training, and the will. I knew I could find the people who did this, and make sure they never hurt anyone else. It wasn't just about retribution anymore. It was about protecting the memory of Emma, honoring her by stopping the cycle of violence. It was about making the world a little safer, one way or another. I started digging into every lead, talking to her friends, watching the neighborhood where it happened. I pieced together what I could. There were rumors, whispers of a gang, causing trouble in the area, people who preyed on the vulnerable. The police knew, but their hands were tied by bureaucracy and fear. I felt the weight of responsibility crushing me, but also a strange clarity. For the first time since the tragedy, I had a purpose beyond grief. I had a mission, but that mission came with a cost. I had to hide what I was doing from almost everyone. I didn't want Emma's family or friends caught in the crossfire of my search. I couldn't risk their safety or my own, so I became a ghost, a shadow moving through the city, gathering information,
watching, waiting. The man who loved Emma was gone, replaced by something sharper, harder, and yet sometimes late at night, I would close my eyes and remember her laughter, the warmth of her hand in mine, the dreams we shared. Those memories were both a comfort and a wound. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: I would not stop. I would find them. I would make them pay, because that was the only way to keep Emma alive in my heart, in my vengeance, in the justice I would deliver.
The moment I decided to stop waiting for justice and start taking it into my own hands was both terrifying and oddly empowering. I knew the risks. Crossing lines I'd never crossed before, becoming someone I never thought I could be. But I also knew I didn't have a choice. Not if I wanted to honor Emma. Not if I wanted to stop these monsters from hurting anyone else. I spent days preparing, digging through every bit of training I'd ever received, sharpening skills that had once been for sport or discipline, but now had a brutal, singular purpose. I revisited old manuals, studied maps of the city's darkest corners, and worked on my physical conditioning with an intensity I hadn't felt since my wrestling days. I knew that this mission wasn't going to be easy. These people were dangerous, and I had to be better. There were nights I almost backed out when the weight of what I was about to do pressed down like a vice. I thought about Emma's face, her laugh, her plans, and that resolve pulled me back. I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for justice in the only way I believed it could be done. I had to be methodical. I couldn't afford mistakes. I started with surveillance, watching the areas where the crime happened, tracking movements, listening, learning. It felt like peeling back layers of a dark, rotten onion. The deeper I got, the more I realized how tangled and brutal the underworld was. These weren't petty criminals. They were hardened thugs, the kind of people who thrived in the shadows and answered only to violence. I tapped into some old contacts from my past, people I'd trained with or met during competitions and martial arts circles. Without giving away my intentions, I gathered information, weapon access, and advice on moving quietly and efficiently. My training in weapons came back fast. The feel of a blade in my hand, the weight of a gun, the precision of aiming. Every muscle remembered what to do. But as I got closer, the moral lines blurred. I caught myself questioning how far I was willing to go. Was this still about justice, or was it becoming something darker, a hunger for blood, a thirst for power? I struggled with that thought every day. I reminded myself of Emma, her kindness, her dreams, her life stolen too soon. That was my anchor when the darkness threatened to consume me. I started striking small blows, gathering evidence, warning people, disrupting small operations tied to the gang I suspected. I became a ghost story among criminals, a shadow that took what they valued, scared them in ways the law could. It wasn't just about punishment anymore. It was about sending a message. The adrenaline rush was addictive, but it also took a toll. I became paranoid, looking over my shoulder, trusting no one. My sleep got worse, nightmares turning into cold, calculated planning sessions. My body ached from the strain, but I pushed through. In quiet moments I wondered what Emma would think of this path. Would she understand? Would she be proud? Or would she see me as lost, consumed by vengeance? I wished I could talk to her, to hear her voice telling me to be careful, to stay human. But the truth was, I was changing. The man who loved Emma was still inside me, but buried beneath layers of rage, pain, and determination. And I knew the final confrontation was coming. I could feel it in my bones, the moment when everything would come to a head, when I would face the people who took her from me. No matter what happened, I was ready. Because this time, I was not the victim. I was the hunter. The final chapter didn't come with a bang or fireworks like I imagined. It came quietly, in the dead of night, like a shadow slipping through the cracks of a broken city. After weeks of watching, waiting, and moving in the darkness, I found them, the people who took Emma from me. Not by chance, but by painstaking effort, by following the threads they thought were buried, by being the ghost they never saw coming. I won't go into detail about what happened that night. It's not for the world to know. What matters is that I was there, and I made sure they would never hurt anyone again. In the silence after, as I stood there alone, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind an emptiness, more profound than any pain I'd felt before. The vengeance I'd sworn to deliver was complete, yet the victory felt hollow. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring Emma back. It didn't fill the void, or mend the shattered pieces of my life. Returning to the apartment felt surreal. The place where we built dreams now felt like a mausoleum. I sat among our memories, the photos, the notes, the remnants of a life interrupted. For a long time I simply sat there, letting the quiet wash over me. But life moves on, even when you don't want it to. Slowly, imperceptibly I began to rebuild, not for me, or for revenge, but for the memory of the woman who believed in a future together. I sought peace in small things. A walk through the park, the taste of coffee on a cold morning, the sound of rain against the window. The man who had been consumed by rage found new purpose. I started volunteering, quietly supporting victims of violence, sharing my story with those who would listen, not to glorify what I did, but to warn, to heal, and to remind that darkness can be fought without losing yourself. Sometimes late at night I still feel the weight of loss pressing down, but I also feel something else, a quiet strength, born of love, pain, and the refusal to let evil win. Emma's light will never fade from my heart, and in that light, I keep moving forward, because sometimes justice isn't just about punishment, it's about surviving, remembering, and living on.